Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another weekly Poker Showdown brought to you by Party Poker. I'm your host, Jamie Staples. Really exciting show this week. Very excited to interview the guest that we have, Mike Sexton, a guy that in my personal life I had in my ears and in front of my eyes when I was first getting into poker. Me and my friends, I remember imitating him and Vince Van Patten on the call in these WPTs that were televised all over Canada as I was growing up. So amazing that I get an opportunity to talk to the guy this week. And in researching for this interview, I purchased his book, and I've been listening to this book, and it's amazing the amount of things that Mike Sexton has managed to cram into his life up to this point. Like it's an incredible story and journey. So first of all, I'd love to recommend his most recent book, but very excited about having a conversation with him today. Before we get into that interview, though, let's talk a little bit about some of the news going around in the industry and some of the tournament results from the past weekend. Let's get into some of the major poker tournament news from the past weekend. First of all, Party Poker Big Game, the $5,000 buy-in, hit the guarantee on the nose, exactly with 100 players. Baba Di Baba won the event for $122,000, and second place, Kitso 7932 collected $87,000. Johan Corsair took down two major titles within hours of each other last Sunday, continued his good run with a fourth place finish for $43,750. So huge congrats to Johan Corsair on the results. Something I wanted to bring up as well that is coming up very soon is the KO series here on Party Poker. Really excited about this because it starts on Sunday. It goes until the 16th of February as well, so we're looking at 2 weeks here. 10 million guaranteed across the course of the festival. Every tournament in the festival is, of course, going to be a knockout. It wouldn't be much of a knockout series if it wasn't that way, would it? There's ways to win your way into bigger events through spins as well, so that's pretty cool if you want to try your luck at some of the bigger games. And important to remember, if you're considering which bounty to play, and you maybe play all over the internet, there is no rake on bounties. Party Poker continues to waive the fee on the bounty elements of a progressive knockout buy-in. So on a $22 buy-in, it's $1 in rake and $21 to the prize pool, which is different than everywhere else out there. So very exciting. Looking forward to Knockout Series, and I hope to see all of you on the felt. So Doug Polk, who is quite a prolific poker content creator and the biggest poker YouTuber on the platform, took to Twitter to basically call out the GPI for not being nominated for an award this year. His direct quote was, "The GPI Poker Awards finalists came out yesterday, and this time I'm not even nominated for any category. Last year I made 74 poker videos for over 35 million views. I covered hands, news, and all kinds of poker topics. I didn't play poker, but it was my most successful year ever for content." GPI President Eric Danis explained Doug Polk's omission by saying, "We took in a lot of feedback and specified that those who created videos in diary-style vlogs would be eligible. Everyone in this category released diary-style vlogs in 2019, some more than others. It's also important to note that the list of semifinalists was taken from an original list of 40 vloggers. The voting panel members sent in their preliminary round ballots, and those with enough votes became semifinalists," Danis continued. So my take on this situation, I think Doug Polk, bar and away, is the most successful poker YouTuber that there has been. Now, that said, I think this award clearly says poker vlogger, and I don't think Doug Polk's content counts as a vlog. I believe he's done a few vlogs on his channel in previous years playing the World Series of Poker, but to me, it is something different. The GPI, in my opinion, is correct here in saying this is about video-style vlogs. So it's a different category. But I think something that should be considered going forward is other poker content on YouTube, because I think if you look at the amount of people making highlights, a lot of Party Poker Team Online, including myself, make highlights that are getting 40, 50 plus thousand views. Doug Polk releasing news-related articles and getting 500,000 views on some of these. These don't fall into the vlog category, but are as big, if not bigger, than the vlogging section of poker YouTube. So I think there deserves to be a category here. If there was, Doug Polk should surely win that award. But given that this is for Poker Vlogger of the Year for YouTube, I think the correct choice was made. I also want to give a shout out to the GPI, who I think did much better this year than in previous years in the whole process of nominating people for an award. I was part of the panel to help select the finalists, and there was an extensive list of options when it came to Streamer of the Year, when it came to Vlogger of the Year, Media Content of the Year. It was really well thought out and thorough, and they went to a panel of experts to nominate who actually deserves to be in the finals. So happy to report Matt Staples and All In Pav, my teammates here from Party Poker Team Online, are nominated for Streamer of the Year alongside Lex Veldhaus and Benjamin Sprague. I totally think, even though I'm a streamer myself, that is the correct four to be up for the win there. So best of luck to all four remaining, especially my teammates and my brother. I'm not gonna lie, I hope Matt wins. But I think all four could be worthy depending on how you sort of look at the situation. Let's talk about a little live poker news now. Alexei Budulin taking down the WPT Russia main event title. I had the opportunity to do a bit of commentary on this. It was an amazing tournament. The Russian player banked $261,571 for the win. Was a career best finish, equating to overtime Budulin's lifetime earnings, so more than he's ever earned live. Party Poker Live sponsored the event, which saw 489 entries, whittled to just 12 players on the final day when it got underway. Team Party Poker's Anatoly Filatov was among the final dozen, but fell in 11th place, a guy that we've had on the podcast. Check that one out if you haven't listened to it. So GG to Anatoly. Budulin also earned a seat at the season-ending WPT Tournament of Champions for the victory. The WPT's main tour now moves on to Razbadov in February for WPT Germany. Moving on now to the Aussie Millions, and Vincent Wonky Wan wins 2020 Aussie Millions main event. Both Wan and second place Nok Tai Hong did a deal agreeing to an equal payout of Australian 1.3 million. Mammoth final day lasted 15 hours and spanned 414 hands. Wow, I didn't realize that. That's a long stream to the Run It Up crew covering that tournament. Known as Wonky Wan, is well known at the Crown Casino in Melbourne for winning 2 six-figure Royal Flush jackpots. Win is easily the biggest of Wan's career. Elsewhere, veteran of the game Eric Seidel finished 5th place for Australian $378,000. And last on the live poker news here, Cale Byrne scoops the Aussie Millions Australian 100,000 buy-in for 1.7 million. The Australian defeated a field comprising 54 entries on home soil. Burns has now racked up over 6 million in cashes at the live felt since 2019. The win caps a fine month for Burns that also saw him inducted in the Australian Poker Hall of Fame. Alex Foxen, partner of Team Party Poker's Kristen Bicknell, finished runner-up for Australian 1.1 million. So congratulations to Alex Foxen. Now let's get into the interview with Mike Sexton. It's difficult to intro a guy like Mike Sexton because he's done so much in poker. He started playing in 1977. He's got over 6 million in tournament earnings. He's a Poker Hall of Famer. He's a World Series of Poker bracelet winner. He's a WPT champion just in 2016 at the Montreal main event. He's the Party Poker chairman and an inspiration to so many. He was a guy that I watched and listened to all the time as I was first starting in the game. Someone that definitely shaped my entry into poker. So incredible honor here to have a conversation with Mike Sexton. Today with us on the podcast, we have Mike Sexton. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time with me today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Jamie. This is great.
So in researching for this conversation, there's so many different places that I could start. I've started listening to your book that just came out, and there was like a million questions. So I'm just going to start with actual poker here. You started playing poker in 1977. You have a World Series of Poker bracelet to your name. But just recently in 2016, you won a tournament in Montreal for $317,000, the WPT title. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind taking me through that tournament, given you've been the voice of that series for my whole poker career. So I just wanted to hear about that.
It was such an exciting time because it was real funny. I mean, I just got very lucky in that tournament. People say, what'd you do different in that tournament than other tournaments? I said, really nothing. I just got lucky. Like with 49 players left in that tournament, I had a little bit below average stack, and the guy raised, and I had 2 nines, and I moved all in, and the guy behind me moved all in, and the original caller. And so we turned up our hands, and I had 2 black nines, and the original raiser had ace king of diamonds, and the guy that re-raised by, and the flop came 10-7 deuce with 2 diamonds, and then came the 3 of spade, and then I said, well, put the 9 of hearts out there. Bang, the 9 of hearts came out at a 1-outer, and I tripled up and went on to win. And it was so exciting, and it's funny because one of the producers of the show, Adam, when I won that pot, he went crazy. He said, you're going to win this tournament. You're going to win this tournament. And as we kept going down table by table, he kept saying, I know you're going to win this. I know you're going to win this. And So eventually he convinced me I was going to win it. I got to the final table as chip leader, and things went my way, obviously, and it was just very exciting because the entire crew, the staff, were just so much rooting for me. I could just feel the vibes in the room, and the pressure. And but I so bad wanted a WPT title and be eligible for the Tournament of Champions and everything that goes with being a winner. And so it was really fun. I got to tell you, it was really a fun, exciting.
It was amazing. I remember I was streaming on Twitch when it was happening, and I was working for a competitor to Party Poker and the WPT at the time. So I wasn't talking about it, but I was following on the side and like seeing what was going on. And I remember hearing you won the tournament. It was amazing to me because I was thinking about, is there any other sport where this could you could compare? And I thought about golf. And the closest thing I could find was Tom Watson contending in the British Open, around 10 years ago now. But that's about it. I couldn't even find a comparison to 39 years after you start playing to take down a major title like this. So
I was actually playing poker before '77. That's just when I turned pro. Was in 1977.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was so exciting. But in that tournament in Montreal, literally once each day, it was like a 5-day event. When you get, including the final table, I was all in and at risk with the worst hand, and I sucked out all those times. That's never happened to me ever before in the history of my life in the tournament. Usually the first time I'm all in, whether I got the best hand or not, I go out. But this particular time, I had king, queen of clubs against ace, queen. I had ace, 4 against ace, queen. I had those 2 9s when I was way up against 2 aces. I mean, it was just crazy how once each day I was all in and at risk and end up winning. And so it just shows you, really, you have to be so lucky to win these tournaments, and nobody knows it better than me because I saw it every day for 15 years, see it all the time, and almost all the time in a tournament, probably 70% of the time it comes down to a race where you get knocked out or not.
Yeah.
And then other times, you need to outdraw your opponent sometime. And the truth is you have to not be unlucky in tournaments. I mean, you have to have your hands hold up when you get your money in with the best hand. It doesn't always happen, obviously. So that's the beauty of the game, is that you're always at risk till that last card is turned over and you're safe. So, but it was exciting. I must say it was so much fun because there was so much love in the room for the people on the World Poker Tour staff that were pulling for me. And I could just feel the vibes. And it was just really. And I promised my son the belt. So that was a big deal. I wanted to make sure he got the belt there.
Right.
In fact,
that's amazing. That's a fairy tale. I love it.
Right here. Whoops, I don't know if you can see this or not. Yeah. Whoop. But
wow.
I promised him the belt, and he said, "Dad," he said, "win that belt for me." I said, "Well," and sure enough, I was happy that I could win it for him. And just the whole experience was just fantastic, and it's always nice to win.
Yeah, that's great. So, I wanted to ask. You said you kind of played similar to how you used to play, but from a poker point of view, what has changed in your game playing that tournament compared to if you were playing a tournament back in '77 when you got started?
Yeah, well, believe me, once the World Poker Tour started and No Limit Hold'em became the rage, I got to see every final table and every hand play at the World Poker Tour, and so I know who was winning and I know why they were winning.
Right.
And the reason was because of aggressiveness. I mean, it's the aggressive players that get to the final table, and they're the ones that usually win the tournaments. And, you just can't play tight and win tournaments. It doesn't happen. So for me, I used to be one of those guys that played really tight, survive, and then hope you get lucky toward the end, where you can get to the final table and anything can happen. But, for years, I was one of the guys that had the most final tables at the World Series of Poker. I think I had 23 final tables at the World Series at one stage a few years back, and I only had 1 win. And when I look back on it, it was always because I was on a short stack when I got to the final table. Mm-hmm. And, so I'd go out, 7th, 6th, 5th in that zone almost every time. The one time that I had the chip lead going to the final table at the World Series, I won the break. And chips are power, and it's proven time and time again at the World Series. And, it makes such a difference. And the guys in today's era, they understand that. They're not trying to survive in tournaments. If they go out the first level or 2, it doesn't really bother them that much. They're trying to accumulate chips. They understand the power of chips. And, it's usually guys like, Phil Ivey, a Gus Hansen, a Michael the Mizrahi grinder, the grinder. All these people that play really aggressive, they're going to get knocked out more often than a tight, solid player. But if they get to the final table, they're going to be the chip leader or one of them for sure. They're not coming in with a short stack, and that's why they win when they get there. And the truth is, as we all know, in tournament poker, the big money is in the top three places, truthfully. And if you want to win the big money, you got to get to the top three.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. I have to say, this is amazing for me because I'm taken back. Like, the nostalgia I have talking with you, Mike Sexton, hearing you on the TV when I was first playing is out of control. I can't believe I'm talking to you in real person. Thank you for doing this.
I'm excited about
it. So if, there's a lot of aspiring poker players that watch my stream, they listen to this podcast, and they're thinking about, can I play for a living, or I want to take it more seriously? What sort of things over your years of commentating have you seen are the biggest pitfalls of people in that category? And then also, what do you think is really important to focus on if you want to give it a shot?
The biggest pitfall I've seen over the years are people that win WPT titles and automatically think they're way better than they really are, and they were just lucky really to win that tournament. So now they'll play higher stakes or bigger buy-in tournament, and before long they're broke again. And don't let one tournament sway you how great of a player you are in it. Just recognize that it was your day and you got lucky that particular day, and to grind it up accordingly, and not go up too fast or think you're too great before you really are. And that's one of the big things that I think. And of course, I get asked all the time, somebody wants to turn to play pro poker, and I say, look, I don't know how good you play. I don't know, I know this. It's very, very difficult. I don't really recommend it to anybody. I'd have to know how somebody really played and think if they could make it, and had the desire to make it and the work ethic to make it. Because today it's way, way, way tougher than it was back when I was coming up and playing as a pro. And, there's just so many good players out there today, so many. And it's difficult. So I wouldn't, I don't want to discourage anybody from trying to achieve their dream, because I did it. I quit my job and played poker for a living. But at that time, I was single. I was young. If I got broke, I could always get a job and go back to work. And if somebody is single and young, that's the time I believe you should try it if you want to go. Because once you're married and you've got a mortgage and you've got kids and you've got bills to pay and you've got a lot more pressure on you, it makes it much more difficult to become a professional poker player. It's not easy. It's really tough. But the number one thing I tell everyone, I says, I don't care how great a player you are. I don't care if you're a winning player. If you don't love to play poker, this is not the avocation for you. Don't play unless you love the game. Not like to play. I mean love to play. And I was very blessed my entire life. Every day I just loved to play poker. When one day was over, I couldn't wait till the next day to get back and play again. And I think that passion for the game is what got me through and what gets a lot of guys through. But I've seen some top pros, believe it or not, who are always bitching and moaning, oh, God, I hate this, and blah, blah, blah. And it drives me crazy because I don't think they should be playing poker for a living. If you don't love the game, to me, that's the number one key if you really want to become a full-time.
I heard that in your book, and I thought it was such a great point because, I think maybe 10 years ago when I first got into poker, it was the easiest way to riches from your basement, right? It was simple to turn just your mind into a bunch of money, and that is not true anymore. So people ask me about that on my stream all the time, and you shouldn't be getting into this game for easy money because it's not anymore. It maybe never was, but it certainly isn't today. So I totally agree with you there. This is a question I wanted to ask you later, but you kind of lead into it here about sort of the poker community as a whole. In listening about your upbringing and school spirit, keeping you on the straight and narrow as you were sort of progressing and growing up as a person, focusing on sports and the pep rallies. I view poker kind of quite opposite, honestly. A lot of the professional poker community seems to be fairly quiet about poker. There isn't a lot of enthusiasm for our game, and people aren't really evangelical about it. Perhaps I'm being pessimistic, but I wanted to ask your point of view on the poker world and sort of how they treat poker. Do you have any thoughts in that respect?
Well, honestly, I'm an old school guy, and I do believe that in the old world, we had much more characters in the poker world than we have now. Had guys like Puggy Pearson and Stu Ungar and Jack Strauss, and just really unique characters in the poker world. The Devilfish, these kind of people. And I don't really see a lot of that these days, You see the extremely intelligent guys. Players coming into the game today are far more intelligent than the average poker player of yesteryear, that's for sure. These are college graduate guys, very bright guys, catch on to the game, and are really brilliant people, honestly, and be very successful in any other field they decided to go into if they wanted to do it. But, poker has a lure to it that we all love. And the best thing about being a poker player, of course, as we all know, it's the freedom it provides you. You can do what you want. I mean, how many jobs are out there in the world that if you don't want to go to work today, you don't have to go to work today, and if you want to work today for an hour or two and then get up and go to a movie, you can't do that in the 9-to-5 world. And that's the beautiful thing about being a poker player, in my mind, is the freedom it provides you. And, the great thing about poker is it is truly, the most equal opportunity employer in the world, because race, color, sex, age, religion, none of that matters. And nobody cares at the poker table about where you are, how rich you are, where you came from, or none of that stuff matters. And it's equal for everybody. So that, to me, is the beauty of the game, that we're all fortunate that anybody who wants to achieve and strive to be the highest level can do it. You see the guys like a Scotty Nguyen that came over from Vietnam. He couldn't even speak English when he got to this country. And then he started out as a busboy and all this and that, and then a poker dealer, and then became a world champion poker player. I mean, the stories of success in the poker world are amazing. The money-making story, and all these stories of how amateurs made it or hit it and changed and become professionals. And it's really, opportunity is out there, but it's just very difficult at the top. It's not easy. Trust me. Most guys that I see that are very successful in the poker world, from even back when the World Poker Tour started, are the guys that got lucky and won on the World Poker Tour in the early days. Right. If you're lucky enough to make $1 million score when you're 23, life is obviously going to be a lot easier for you. Doesn't mean you're better than the other guy who played 20 tournaments and didn't win anything. It just means you got lucky on a good day and happen to have $1 million bankroll now, and now your life changes. And obviously, we all play poker for the reason that, you take a toothpick and turn it into a lumberyard. You take a small amount of money, you can win a large amount. And that's the beauty of tournament poker. That's why everybody plays it.
Yeah, that's it. So in today's day and age, is there anything we can do to get these characters back, or are we just destined to sort of have the general mindset we have in the community going forward?
Yeah, the tough thing about it, even today, and we know they're not anywhere near the best players in the world today, but the biggest names, the biggest stars, the biggest, well-known players in poker are the guys that won on the tour back in the early days. They're still the biggest names in poker, even though we know they can't compare to these high rollers of the day and the top-notch players of the day, but in skill terms. But the truth is, they were seen on television back in the day, and people know who they were. And you had a chance to get on television more in those days because the tournaments only had a couple hundred players, and 300 players, and it's easier to get to the final table, and they did it several times. Now tournaments are so big, and it's so infrequent that you win, that even if a guy wins once, he's still not that well known. He's got to win twice or even 3 times to really become a name in poker these days, and that's not easy to do.
Right. That makes sense. And so TV on poker, I wanted to ask about that too, because it seems like back in the day, companies would pay for poker on TV. And from what I've heard in other interviews and stuff, it's very much the other way now, where there isn't as much desire for poker content on TV. Am I correct in that, or what is the future of poker on TV? How do you see that playing out?
Well, obviously, the World Poker Tour changed the poker world forever. And I think every poker player should bow down to the World Poker Tour day in and day out, because none of us would be where we are without it. It literally changed poker, and the game we now play most often, obviously, is No Limit Hold'em, which didn't even exist before the World Poker Tour came around, other than at the World Series of Poker, which was just held once a year. But poker is different now. TV back in those days, the tour came on, and then online poker came on, and obviously they put on their own poker shows and branding, and most TV networks figure they have to pay to get a show on television, but they learned that they didn't have to pay poker shows to be on TV. Poker online sites paid them to get on TV. So it was a whole new world for television, because they'd never heard of that, where somebody's going to pay them, to get a show on TV, and that's what happened. with the online sites when everybody had money back in the day, and they were all advertising on TV, and everybody was getting sponsored and getting paid to get patched up for final tables and all this and that. I mean, it's a different world than it is now. I don't think that's going to happen again. I do think we can get sponsorship in poker. That's one thing that I believe can still be the future of poker once it's worldwide and accepted, and not worldwide, but I mean basically in the U.S. once we're back in full stream again.
Right.
I do think it will be possible for big sponsors and to sponsor tournaments. You know, I look at the golf world. You know, I like to compare to golf, and you see every week you got the FedEx tournament, you got the Buick Open, you got the Budweiser Open, whatever it might be. But I don't see why poker tournaments can't do the same thing, where one of those people sponsoring a major tournament to be the primary sponsor, add $1 million to the prize pool, for example, and be the brand and get the exposure of it, you know, when we're on television for a big main event kind of, where they get branding for it. So, that's what I would love to see. Of course, I always love to see poker players that can get sponsored, where their entry fees can get paid, because I know how much easier that makes it playing on the circuit. You know, the pressure would be so much relieved from players, you know, if they could get patched up from a sponsor who's paying their entry fees, you know, where now they don't have to come up with it every time. And it just makes the whole world difference, where every time you're playing, you know, you're like a golfer playing on a free roll, essentially. Right. And that's the ideal dream scenario for all poker players. But, you know, it's been a long time coming. We were starting to get into it just a little bit, but then when they eliminated online poker in the U.S., we had those issues with some of the sites. It's just created much more difficulty for that.
Yeah, I see the similarities in the golf world. I mean, the PGA Tour specifically, just so wealthy. The amount of corporate sponsorship and connection in that tour is incredible. But, you know, I had a cousin that was a professional golfer, and he played on the mini tours. And it was very much the same way, where, you know, 2 tours away from the PGA Tour, a win was maybe $26,000, but you got to travel around, you got to stay in a hotel, you got to pay for your club. So no one on that tour was winning any money. But it does seem like there should be an opportunity in poker for these big sponsorships. How do we get that started? Why are they not interested, and why is no one trying?
Well, the reason that, honestly, that the companies aren't interested, I think they would be interested because they know how many play poker. But the truth of the matter is, they don't want religious zealots picketing their sidewalks out there that you're sponsoring gambling kind of thing. And that's the issue with them, that they're afraid that a number of their people may boycott their products because they're supporting some kind of gambling venture that they don't believe in. So that's probably the real issue behind it in the boardroom, that they're afraid to touch it because they don't want to create any conflict.
Okay. So that image of poker, do you see, is that an issue, or is that the reality we live in, where poker is in films beside blackjack tables or is portrayed in a saloon or with a bunch of criminals playing? Is that a problem that we need to try and fix, or is that just the reality of the world we live in?
Well, I mean, obviously, as we know, that poker used to be played in the back of smoke room-filled pool halls, you know, and now what we have is mega million played in the most lavish casino properties in the world, and it's not back room. It's the most high-class situation you could ever have, yes. And millions of people around the world play it now. And, you know, the most beautiful thing about poker over the last 10 years, in my mind, is the global expansion of poker. I mean, it is so big globally now, it's mind-boggling. Even when we started the World Poker Tour, we had one stop in Paris, France, and that was it. And now you see poker played literally all over the world, big-time tournaments. I mean, it just blows my mind. Like next week, as you know, we have a millions tournament in Uruguay. I'm traveling to Uruguay to play in a poker tournament. And I've been in so many countries around the world to play poker now that I would have never had that opportunity without poker to go to all these places and see the world, so to speak. And that's the beauty. One thing about as being a traveling poker pro is that you do get to see the world. And, you know, that's you're not going to ever get to do that maybe if you're not in the world and don't travel to these tournaments. And I'd recommend to all poker players out there that if you have enough money where you can travel and afford to go to another country to play a poker tournament, that you should do it because it's an experience that you may not get the rest of your life, and so do it while you can. And if an opportunity presents itself, hopefully you win a satellite on Party Poker and a package where you can go to these events and try it out, and you'll see how much fun it is. And who knows, maybe win $1 million. But even if you win nothing, the experience, the travel opportunity, and is just an experience in your life that I think is well worth it.
That's awesome. So I wanted to ask you about the WPT. How did you get started with the WPT? Like, when did you become the voice alongside Vince Van Patten that I grew up with in this poker world?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened. We were just talking about the PGA Tour. And back in the 90s and before, I'd always felt poker should have its own tournament of champions. That, I patterned my tournament of champions that I created in the late 90s after the tournament of champions of golf, where you have to win a PGA Tour event during the calendar year to get to play in that tournament. And I want to do that for poker. So I put on an event in the poker world that if you won any poker tournament in the world over a $200 buy-in, that you were eligible to play in the Tournament of Champions of Poker. And so I put that event on. I did it for 3 years, and I never made money with it, so I had to let it go. But that tournament, I still believe, honestly, is the classiest tournament in poker history. I really believe. But by putting that event on, when I put it on the last year that I did it, I was filming it, and the guy that filmed it for me was a guy named Steve Lipscomb. He didn't have a job. We said, "You want to film this?" He'd done some documentaries at the World Series before, and so he filmed my final Tournament of Champions that I held. And when it was over, he came up to me and he said, "Mike," it was my tournament, so I did the commentary on it. He said, "That was the best job of poker commentary I've ever heard." I said, "Well, thanks, I appreciate it." Fast forward a couple of years later, he started the World Poker Tour. He came up to me and he said, "Mike," he said, "I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is I want you to be a commentator on the World Poker Tour. The bad news is if you take the job, you can't play in any of the tournaments." Because he knew I was just a full-time poker pro at the time. And it was a new experience for me, and I thought it'd be a lot of fun, be on television. And so I took the job, and obviously it turned out that I truly believe is the greatest job in the poker world. And I still believe that. And it was just fantastic. I just loved every minute of it. I love the World Poker Tour. I'll always love the World Poker Tour. But 2.5 years ago, Rob Young and sat me down at dusk till dawn when I was over there playing a tournament. And him and Tom, the CEO of Party Poker, said, "Mike, we'd like you to come work full-time for us for the Millions Tour. And, we're not sure if it's going to conflict with WPT dates or any of that. We don't want to put you in a position where you're going to be awkward," because I was a consultant for Party Poker at that time. But they wanted me to go work for them full time and offer me an opportunity. And so I left the World Poker Tour after 15 seasons. But I'll always love the World Poker Tour. I love everybody there. They're just fantastic people. They've done a phenomenal job, and it'll always be a special place in my heart. But, I can say the same for Party Poker, certainly, because I started this, and it will always be a part of me. And I'm just thrilled with what's happened with Party Poker and the Millions Tour over the last few years. I just salute Rob Young and Tom for what they've done in terms of creating this fantastic opportunity for players where they can win satellites on Party Poker, qualify to go to these Millions Tour events, and who knows, may get lucky and win $1 million. It's the dream is all about. It's what everybody who plays poker dreams about, especially the ones coming up, especially recreational players or young pro players that don't have a bank. And believe me, satelliting is how you get in these tournaments when you start out.
Yes, absolutely.
The first 5 times I played the World Series, I had to win a $200 satellite to get in. Otherwise I didn't get to play. And I was lucky enough to win one. And, and then I cashed in 4 of the first 5 times I ever played the World Series. So, I understand satelliting in because that's what it's about when you're young, when you don't have enough money to buy in directly. And believe me, back in my days, nobody had $10,000 to buy into the World Series. It just didn't happen. Nobody had money. So most everybody had to satellite in. But back then, they had $200. You bought in for $220. And the rebuys were $200, but you didn't re-entry. You didn't have to pay the extra $20. You never left your seat. You raised your hand, and they just brought you chips. Right. And the dealer just gave you another $200 worth of chip. And so you just stayed in the same seat, even if you got broke. And people were rebuying all the time. And, every time they had one of those satellites, every night that they had them and twice a day for the main event, they'd give out 12, 14 seats every time. And, that's how people got in the main event. That's how I got in. And so you can still do the same thing now. If you're in a spot where you can play online poker, then obviously I'd highly recommend that you try to win a package to one of these events. And,
I think it's such a great goal to work towards. It's just like, you grind a little bit online, you play some tournaments with the goal of building up some satellite dollars. And then eventually, maybe after a year of playing these satellites, you have enough for a full, 16,000 package to the Bahamas or to Uruguay or wherever it is you want to go around the world. You can see them listed on the Party Poker Live website. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, that's kind of like the modern poker dream to me, is being able to have those life-changing experiences through playing, $2 tournaments in your basement. That's pretty cool. So, I share your sentiments when it comes to party poker. I'm really excited to be part of this opportunity with you, and sort of in my first year with party poker. You're currently the chairman of party poker. So I wanted to ask you about like what has your role been once you started with them, and sort of what sort of things do you think are going to be happening for party poker going forward?
Yeah, well, when I started with them, obviously they didn't have any site, they had nothing. And I actually flew to India where the software development team was, and I was there for months, and to help the software developers.
Is this back in 2006 you're talking, or the current iteration?
No, this was January 2nd of 2001. I was hired a week before that as the poker domain expert,
right.
Where everything poker would go through me. So I flew to India to work with this software development team. Now, this company, which was iGlobal Media at the time, had online casino gaming sites. They had some blackjack sites and slot machines and all this and that. And they'd heard that poker was going to be the next in the poker world. So they just thought one branch of their business, they would go to poker. So they were going to build a poker site. And I was going to be the guy that helped them to build it. So I get over there. I meet 5 guys that were assigned to develop the poker site. And I realized in 5 minutes that none of them knew anything about poker. Nobody in this company knew anything about poker. I thought, how can anybody start a poker site where nobody knows anything about? I was wild.
Right.
And I said, look, I know nothing about software. I know nothing about computers. They said, if you tell us what to do, we can do it. I said, well, I can do that. And we literally started out. I said, well, here's the button. I said, player A has a small blind. Player B has the big blind. Player C has an options where he can fold, he can call, he can raise. Now, back then, it was just limit poker when we first started the site. So it wasn't, so it was much easier to develop software at limit poker because you only have one option. When you raise, you can only raise a certain amount.
Right, yeah.
And so we literally started with limit hold'em, then we went to 7-card stud, and then 7-card stud high-low, and then Omaha, and then Omaha high-low. And we went to all the games, and I literally told what to do and how to develop and how to say it. And I was over there 4 months. And they were on their way then and pretty much got the games under control. And then I went to the Dominican Republic where the customer support was located at that time. And I had to teach these people about poker because they knew nothing about poker. And I was telling them what people were going to call up and complain about, et cetera, et cetera. And then we launched the site on August 1st of 2001. And we launched the site with Party Poker Million satellites. And this was the idea I came up with, where a player would come to our site, they'd play a $20 one-table satellite, and the winner of that satellite would go to the semifinals, which are going to be held a few months later in January. And from that semifinals, we were going to take 100 players, the top 100 from the semifinal, onto a cruise ship, give them $500 in cash, pay for their cruise, and let them play for $1 million in cash in first place. And that was the idea I had to get players to the site. That's how we launched the site with just satellites, no cash games, nothing else, just one table satellites for the Party Poker Million. And that's how I got going. And after a couple of weeks, our CEO, Vikrant Bhargava, he said, hey, what if we try playing a 3 and 6 limit hold'em game on there? I said, that's great, let's try it. So we stuck one out there. It filled up in 5 minutes. We put another table out. It filled up in 5 minutes. And we were shocked. And now we're getting real rake and real cash coming down the hole, and right. From a cash game. And, without testing, without doing anything properly, like, we probably should have done for months. I just threw it out there. Bam, it worked. And that was how Party Poker got started. And the Party Poker Million, once we had established the semifinals and got the 100 players to come on board, the guy that had filmed my Tournament of Champions, Steve Lipscomb, he came up to me. He said, Mike, he said, I think I can put your Party Poker Million on television and it won't cost you any money. I said, really? Wow, that'd be fantastic. He got a budget from the Discovery Channel, which had the Travel Channel. He went to them with this idea to put this on there. And because, it was a cruise, it was a traveling event, they put it on there. And he did a phenomenal job of putting that show together. And the Party Poker Million, and that's what the show was called, Party Poker Million, right on television, where you knew it was Party Poker and you see the logos everywhere. And that show was fantastic, and it got the highest ratings on the Travel Channel that they'd had in years. And they replayed it, and it got high ratings all the time. And later, when he developed the World Poker Tour, he got shot down by all the networks. He went to all the major networks to try to get poker on television, trying to tell them it was going to be the next greatest sport, et cetera, et cetera. And then he went back to the Discovery Channel because he had history with them, the Travel Channel. They agreed to do it, and they put it on TV. And every Wednesday night in America for the first 5 years was the World Poker Tour. And it was the most exciting times of all. And, the players back then were so supportive. And I think of the guys back in the early days of the World Poker, the Daniel Negreanu's, the Gus Hansons, these guys that won several times, were so supportive in addition to that, I give them, back when I first started, I think I was the first player to get a sponsorship deal. And I got it back in 1989. And I was patched up. And and it was a golf company, LeMode, and I knew my best friend, or one of my best friends, played on the senior golf tour, and LeMode was one of his sponsors. His name was Harold Henning. And I said, Harold, you think LeMode would be interested in sponsoring a poker player? And he laughed. He said, because he gambled when he was a poker player. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, they're pretty open-minded. You might try it. So anyway, I went over to see him, and I'm pitching my thing. I said, look, just put me in the main event of the World Series. I said, I'll play 100 tournaments a year. I'll patch up all the year. You'll get all this promo. And he said, look, we pay our golfers $10,000 a year, and they're on TV every week, So anyway, we made a deal, and luckily, wasn't a month and a half later that I won the bracelet at the World Series of Poker. And then they actually did a story on Card Player magazine, and as you can see here, I don't know if you can see it or not.
Wow!
But I'm wearing the mode, and they put me on the cover of the Card Player, and it was very exciting. And so they were very happy because I was on the magazine cover, and anyway. But all the players laughed at me back in those days. They thought I was crazy because I wore these patches everywhere I went, and hats, sweaters, and jackets, and all that stuff. But the only guy back in those days that said, Mike, you're on the right track. That's a great idea, was Phil Hellmuth, believe it or not. And then later on, we started the World Poker Tour. Say 10 years later, Daniel Negreanu came on the scene, and he was a guy that recognized the potential, of sponsorship and poker and getting out there. And, some guys would say, what are they going to pay me, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas Daniel and Phil, when they started out, they would do everything for nothing. Interviews, lessons, autograph sessions, anytime the World Poker Tour called them for a charity event, anything, they were out there willing to do. And obviously, as we know now, the two most successful guys in history in terms of getting endorsement deals, in terms of getting paid to go do seminars somewhere, are Daniel and Phil. And it's no coincidence, but those guys had vision like I think back in the day before anybody ever dreamed about television or sponsorship. And obviously, it paid off for all of us.
That's very cool. Simon Trumper actually asked that on Twitter, so he wanted to hear a story about Mike's experiences as an initial party poker investor. Quite the ride, he said. So I wanted to sort of get into that. But I remember hearing on another podcast some crazy numbers in those days, like the amount of money that was coming into the company and the opportunities. Do you have any stories from those days that might be interesting for the world?
People don't realize just how big online poker was back 2004, 2005, 2006. I mean, it was huge. It was a common. People think it was the moneymaker, effect that the poker exploded. The real reason poker exploded was because of the World Poker Tour, because poker was on television. Then moneymaker won the main event, but online poker was coming on at the same time. So it just happened to be a perfect combination of timing for all those things as to why poker exploded like it did. But back when online poker was sponsoring players and putting everybody in and paying fees, for example, Party Poker sponsored the 2006 World Series of Poker. They paid him $20 million to be the sponsor of the World Series of Poker. They paid him another $2 million to sponsor the Tournament of Champions of Poker at the World Series of Poker. They paid him another $2 million to put their logo on the steps walking up into the building. I mean, that kind of money was just being thrown around back then, and obviously they were benefiting from that. So it was just that kind of era back then, that you're not going to see today. But, when you had a business that was making over $2 million a day, you could do some of those expenditures like Party Poker was doing back then. And it was just an exciting time, a different era. And, hopefully online poker can come back. But honestly, it's not nearly, I want to say, the open business that it used to be, because when we started Party Poker, one of the keys to our success was having affiliates to our site, meaning affiliates are people that are business partners with you that send traffic to the site. And we had partners from sex sites, from all these sites, where people will click a button, hey, you want to play poker, click here. And now when they came to play on our site, that click that they came from, those people made money. So, everybody wanted to be an affiliate, and affiliates made huge money back in the day for Party Poker. I can tell you that. I mean, huge. And so it was just an exciting time for everybody. And the problem now is, when new players come to a site and they come on to play, whether it's in a cash game or a tournament, is that the caliber of play is so much tougher today that it's difficult for them to last, and stay in money or win. And when you don't win, you get discouraged. When you lose money, you get discouraged. So the problem is how do you get players to a site and where they can play at an affordable amount of money and not get crushed right in the beginning when they first start playing before they can fall in love with it. And, obviously the only way to do it, in my mind, play small buy-in tournaments. That's what I believe every poker player should do when they first come to an online site, to get comfortable with sites, with how to bet, with the reaction, with see how tournaments work. And you can play a tournament for $10 or $20 where you can learn how to play and get a feel for the game, where you're not diving into a couple $100 buy-in tournament where you're going to get crushed and knocked out and you might not come back again, kind of thing. And the same thing in cash games. You have to start out in low stakes cash games, to be able to survive and to play and last a little while, because truly, everybody wants to play higher all the time. And if you dive in a bigger game, the competition's tougher and new players aren't going to last. And as we know, there's an attrition to all online poker sites. Players go broke. And for everyone that goes broke, you got to bring in a new one just to status quo. So it's not easy getting players, and how do we get them? How do we get them to stay? And how do we get them when they do come in, not to get crushed and depressed and busted out where they don't want to come?
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So in terms of education, I think that's something that we are doing really well at least in the modern age. We have Twitch, we have YouTube, we have social media, and we have a lot of ambassadors like myself or the team I'm on that are like doing everything we can to share poker to a younger generation, one that didn't grow up with poker on TV. But what about like software solutions? Like, let's say someone had a bankroll of $500 and the site wouldn't actually let them play a tournament above a certain level. Like, do you have any ideas in regards to how we could structurally actually protect those players from just going broke in a week? Or would they get frustrated that they can't actually play the tournament they want to play?
Yeah, that's a tough one there because, say there's a $200 buy-in where you're playing a satellite to win $1 million seed or something like that. They want to play it, and now you're going to tell them they can't play it. Yeah. I don't see that happening. The beauty about poker is that you're supposed to have the freedom, to be able to play what you want when you want, and that's the thing that bothers me about that. I live in the U.S. and it's supposed to be the land of the free, and it just drives me completely mad that the government is trying to tell me that when I get off work and I come home, I can't play a $20 online poker tournament on my computer if that's what I want to do with my money. I mean, some people want to go to the movies. Some people want to go out to eat dinner. Some people want to go shopping. Well, millions of people would love to play a small poker tournament where they might win some money, regardless whether they win money or not. And so it really bugs me that you can legally go in a casino and play poker, and when you leave that casino and go home, you can't play. It just doesn't make sense to me. I hate that, and obviously most all poker players agree with me on that. It's just very sad that they dictate to us what we can do with our money. And
yeah,
we all know that if it was wide open like it used to be, Yes, certain people lose more than they should. Yes, certain people are going to run up credit card debt or have problems financially because they've overextended themselves. We understand that. But the other 90-some% of the people, are being penalized because this guy can't discipline himself or handle his own problems. And I don't think that's fair. I think everybody in the end has to be responsible for their own actions. And that includes whether you're playing online poker or whether you're going to a casino where you can dump off your whole, or the racetrack, or anywhere else where it's legal to play gambling, so to speak, or bet them in the sports books. So trust me, I've been around long enough to know anyone who's going to gamble and wants to go broke can go broke. It's just very simple to do. And, you have to have a discipline about it, and you have to understand that, you have a bankroll. I say anybody where they're going for a trip, take what you want and expect to lose. What you can afford to lose, take that money, enjoy yourself, have fun with it. If you win and bring back more money, that's fantastic. But expect to lose it, just enjoy yourself and have a good time. And the same thing can be said for recreational poker players, and, play poker, enjoy the game. You can win at poker. That's the beauty of the game. I don't care who you are, even how bad you play. It is possible you can win. But obviously, we all know those that prepare to win do better than those that don't. And the people that are studying the game and learning how to get better and watching winning players and doing what they're doing is certainly going to make you a winning player. And I'm one of the firm believers that believe anybody, and I mean anybody who wants to become a winning poker player, can do so now with, as you pointed out, all the technology and tools available now to help you become a winner.
Yeah, there isn't those structural barriers like there used to be, where just no one knew what the right strategy. You had to play to get the right strategies, which is wild to me. I don't have to play to get better. I can just watch good players, and then I could show up on day one and know what I'm doing. That's a completely different world. So, I wanted to ask you about Stu Ungar. This is a guy that I'm asked about all the time on my stream, and there's such a legend around this guy, and there's relatively few people that I can talk to that will have a firsthand account of who he was and the legend of Stu Ungar as a poker player and a person. So I know you were very close with him, and I wanted to ask if you had a Stu Ungar story for us.
Well, I have a lot of Stu Ungar stories, honestly, and people that buy my book, Life's a Gamble, there's a whole chapter in Stu in there, as well as, the other 5 icons, or some 5 icons of poker, Chip Reese, Doyle Brunson, Puggy Pearson, Billy Baxter, and Stu Ungar. And they're all good stories. And, I was very fortunate. When I started coming up in the poker world, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. And I grew up with a guy named Danny Robinson, who many felt became the best 7-card stud player in the world at a later time. Nobody knew it back when I grew up, but Chip Reese was also from Dayton, Ohio. And after he graduated from Dartmouth, he was going to go to Stanford Law School. And him and Danny took a trip to Las Vegas. And in that summer, they won like $1 million over 4 months' time. And Chip never left Las Vegas. And, they were always begging me to come out to Las Vegas. This was like the summer of 73 or 74. And I was married in North Carolina and had a job. And then finally in 1977, I got a divorce, quit my job. And Danny was always saying, come to Vegas, come to Vegas. So I'd come out and I'd stay with these guys. Now, they were in the high roller section. They played with the big wig back in the day, So because I was such good friends with those guys, that I got to hang around the high-stakes poker players back in the day. Doyle Brunson, Billy Baxter, Puggy Pearson, Amarillo Slim. Guys that played in high-stakes poker back in the day. And Stu Ungar when he came in 1978. And so I got to know all those guys because I was such good friends with Chip and Danny. But you can't get in it. You couldn't get in that circle unless you were one of those players, or somebody like me who was very fortunate that was good friends with a couple guys that were in that circle. So I became good friends with all the high stakes players, Doyle, Stu Ungar, Puggy Pearson. And these guys liked me and took a kin to me, and I didn't have any money for games. And, but, over time, if I would go broke, they would always loan me money. They would stake me in tournaments. They would stake me playing things. So I was very fortunate in that regard that when I first went out to Las Vegas, which was in 1985 is when I moved out to Las Vegas, that if I got broke or if I didn't have money, I could always get money because I knew all these high stakes players and Chip Reese, and these guys would always loan me $5,000 if I needed or something, or stake me in a tournament. And it was because of that connection that I never feared going broke. Whereas if I came out here on my own and didn't, I would have protected my bankroll way, way, way more than I did, I used to parlay in the big games, but my big problem, as everybody knows, is that I went broke betting sports all the time. And I did it all my life, and lost all my money. It didn't matter what I won. And I won all the time playing poker. And then I blow it into sports. And that was my vice. That was my degeneracy. And it's nothing I'm proud of. The only reason I talk about it now, and I talked about it in my book, is that I'm not trying to preach to somebody and tell them what to do, but I'm just trying to say, look at me, look what I did. I went through all this money, very embarrassed about it, very stupid, very dumb, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. And that's why I'm not afraid to share my story about how much money I went through. And believe me, it was multi-millions because I was just an idiot betting on sports, something I had no control over. And, it's just hard to beat the vigorous, and I couldn't beat it. And I enjoyed it. I loved it, but it's just a dumb habit. And, I can remember Bobby Baldwin told me years ago, if you live in Vegas and play poker for a living, he said, if you're a great player, you might survive in Vegas if you have one. He said, but if you have more than one, he said, you have zero chance to survive. In other words, mine was sports. That was the one habit I had. But if I bet horses, that was number two.
Right.
If I'd have done drugs, if I'd have drank, if I'd have gone to titty bars and gone to clubs, if I'd have gone in the pit and gambled in the pit. I mean, there's so many ways that you can lose your money, if you have vices. And if you can't control that, you're certainly not going to survive in Las Vegas. And, but I always remember that he said that. And I had one vice, and I survived, but I was very fortunate to survive, I guess. But it's not easy in a 24-hour if you have vices, and there's so many things available to you, that you can do 24 hours a day. And believe me, I know as a poker player, when you lose or you take a bad beat and you've had a very bad session or two, you might want to go off and drink and or do, and
right.
you're depressed. And I understand it. And, but you have to have this. You have to have bankroll management. And, that's the thing I tell all the young players coming up. But, bankroll management is more important than being a great poker player. Truthfully, you can give me an A-plus poker player who's a lousy bankroll man. And I put myself in that A category that was lousy bankroll. And then you give me a B or B-minus poker player who's an A-plus bankroll management. At the end of the year, it's that B-minus or B poker player that's going to have more money than the A poker player. And, it's not discussed enough in my mind, in terms of when people are doing seminars or teaching about poker or something, you need to hammer that point home a little bit more that, you have to be very careful with your money and your bankroll management because, I don't care if you're the best poker player in the world. If you don't have money to ante, what difference does it make?
Right.
So
yeah, of course.
Money. I mean, money is your job. It's your office. It's your, without it, you have no business. So, if you're going to be a poker player, you got to have money to play.
It's amazing the stories you tell about the old times because it's so different from the world that I grew up in poker, and it's changed so much. The lending 5,000, that's never been something that me or my friends would ever take part in. And I think of online poker, which is really how I got started. You're not in proximity to any of these vices. You're not around clubs, you're not around strip clubs, you're not around the pits or slot machines, or you're at home doing your thing. So it's a very different experience. I think in today's age, it's even like just more straight and narrow in the online sense.
It's different, but still, you're playing poker online. If you're playing in the cash game, I mean, you can't go crazy. It's easy to go tilt online, and you got to be about that as well. So, it still applies to a certain degree, obviously, but, in the old days, it was different. Like I said, the satellites for the main event were $200. Well, all you'd have to do is say, who wants to stake me? And somebody put up $200 to take a chance on doing the main event of the World Series of Poker. It was so easy to get staked in satellites back then. It wasn't even. Now when you go to the World Series, guys I know that are trying to get staked, they just can't even get staked anymore. And because people don't think they're good enough to win anymore. But back then it was so easy to get staked and easy to borrow money. But I say it was easy to borrow money. It's easy to borrow money if they know they're going to get their money back at some point. And they're just trying to help you out. And for me, that was the case because they knew I was a winning player and I'd win and they'd get their money back. So, but it's a different era now for sure. And, if you're on your own, and you have X amount of money, decide you're going to play poker with, then you have to budget that money very carefully where you don't go broke. Because we know, especially tournament poker, I mean, the swings and the amount of times you can go without winning is a long time, and sometimes you feel it's very unfair and very unjust when you know you're a better player than that guy, and yet you see him win this tournament or you see him getting the money 2 or 3 times and it's frustrating. And really, I truly believe that the number one thing about being a tournament pro for sure, or a regular tournament player, is you have to be so mentally tough that it's unbelievable. I think the mental toughness of being able to deal with getting broke at least 80% of the time when you're a tournament player, is very tough to deal with. And if you can't handle that mentally, if you go crazy or you go berserk or you want to slam chairs around on the way out the door, then tournament poker is probably not for you. Because truthfully, I don't care how great you are, even the greatest of the greatest, might cash 20% of the time in tournament poker. So it's frustrating. You got to deal with the losses, and you have to understand that most of the time when you play a tournament, you are going to lose. But believe me, those few times that you get to that final table and the rare times that you win make up for all the and you know that when you win. And I say that I so wish that every poker player who plays a lot of poker could just one time in their life win a bracelet at the World Series, win a Millions event, win a World Poker Tour event, win a real big-time poker tournament just once, and you will understand that it makes up for all those times that you busted out.
That's amazing. That's really great. So, Mike, I have to say my biggest regret in poker, in my poker life, which is relatively short, was I was at the Gray Eagle Casino at a WPT deep stack, and I was having breakfast, and I saw you walk in, and I didn't introduce myself. You were sitting by yourself having breakfast. That was my opportunity to say hi. I've beat myself up ever since, so I'm glad I could sort of meet you today and set the record straight in my mind. I really appreciate you taking the time. Just to sort of close, what's coming ahead for you? What is the next couple years for Mike Sexton?
Well, we're excited about the Millions Tour, of course, and obviously, we're hoping that players come to Party Poker, try to qualify, try to win a Millions package. Treat yourself to going to one of these trips, like you said, and who knows, you may get lucky and win some money, but otherwise, experience of a lifetime. People that have the opportunity to go to the beautiful Baja Mar resort that we went to in the Bahamas. That's just such a luxurious property that without poker, who would have an opportunity to go to this place, and it's fantastic. And our casino partners, they have wonderful casino properties to go to and play poker in, whether it's in Montreal or in Germany or wherever it might be. But I highly recommend that players take a shot, take an opportunity, try to win some Party Poker Live dollars. Go to an event, experience the thrill of trying to play in a big time poker tournament and the fun of it and recreation of it. And don't be afraid to take a shot, to reach out and try to grab the brass ring, because truthfully, that's how all of us did it, and it's how you get ahead. It's how it happens for every poker player that comes into money. Most poker players nowadays, they come into money, if they're a millionaire or more, have done it by winning a big time poker tournament somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's very rare. It's not like the days when I grew up. When I grew up, everybody started playing poker. You started playing 5 and 10. Then you played 10 and 20. Then you played 15, 30, 20, 40, 30, 60. You moved up to 50, 175, 150. I mean, you got to be the best. You were playing 2 and 400. That's the way it was. And you might have played each of those levels for 6 months at a time before you went up to. Now, you may have taken a shot once in a while to play a higher limit every once in a while. But the truth is, you worked your way up the ladder and you promoted yourself when you wanted to, when you felt like that's the beauty of poker. You can advance yourself and play, promote yourself to the biggest games anytime you, but just be careful in doing that. And if you do promote yourself to a bigger game and you're in a bigger game and you're not winning in it, don't be too stubborn not to drop back down to play the game that you were beating, and I think that's one thing that many players have a very difficult time, very difficult, that to swallow your pride, to swallow your ego, to say, wow, I haven't beat that 5 and 10 game or 10-20 blind game. I just haven't beat that game. I better get back down to 2 and 5, or a game that I can beat. And most of them don't want to do it, because once you play high stakes, and I can tell you because I've played them, once you play high stakes, you like it up there. You want to play up there. Mm-hmm. And I believe that some players get up there and play in high stakes games every once and let people see them. And that's the reason they get staked in these higher buy-in tournaments, because they said, well, this guy was playing in a big stakes cash game there. He must be a good player. So, I can put him in some tournaments here. But, I can remember Chip Reese told me a long time ago. He said, if you're a winning poker player, getting staked means is that you're giving half your money away. And when you get staked, you got to give half your money away. So if you can afford to play on your own, that's what I highly recommend that you do. And you're far better off, for example, in my case, I can remember I used to play 30-60 all the time. And then somebody would come and want to stake you and say, okay, here, why don't you play 50 and 100? So you move to play 50 and 100 or a higher stakes game, for example, when in reality, you're only playing for half. So you're playing for the same stakes you were playing for, but the game is tougher. So it doesn't make sense that you go up and play in that game. If you can play on your own, and that applies to tournaments too. If you really believe you're a winning poker player, when you take stake money, if you can afford to play it, and I understand why you take stake money, because obviously you don't want the pressure of multiple entry fees to hinder your bankroll and stuff. And it's nice to get staked. Believe me, I was staked for years and years, and I understand it's beautiful to stake, knowing you get to play every tournament. And, that takes a lot of pressure off of you. But I'm just saying, if you have an opportunity to play on your own and you're a winning player, do it, because otherwise you are giving half your money away like chips.
Right. That's great advice. I fully agree with it. I think it's really good to remember. Bankroll management especially, I think that's where I see people fail on my Twitch stream as well. So,
it's hard for me to give lessons in bankroll management, because I was the worst in the world at bankroll management. I can tell you that right now.
You made the mistakes for us.
What was the buy-in for this game, or a certain game?
Yeah.
And how much money do you have to buy into this game? Like 200 times the big blind or some, horse shit like that. And I said, what's the buy-in? That's what you need to get in the game. That's why I believe for years and years, that's how you got in. And, and for bankroll management, Jonathan Little asked me to do a podcast with him about bankroll management. And for all those that haven't seen it, I would recommend watching it, because it may, if you have some kind of leak or you have some kind of problem, or you even sense that you may be coming into some kind of a problem, whether it be drinking or drugs or gambling in the pit or betting on sport, I highly recommend you watch this video of me and Jonathan Little, because I truthfully believe it is good for you, and that it may help you. And, that's the reason I did it. It's the reason I exposed myself and say how many millions I've lost betting sports. I'm not proud of it at all, certainly. I just really am hopeful that others can learn from my mistakes and not go down the same path that I did, and make those mistakes, because, especially nowadays, because believe me, it's tougher to get money now than it's tougher to win tournaments. And if you're lucky enough to win $1 million buy-in tournament, believe me, you better watch that money, because it may be quite a while before you win the next one. Right. You don't know. Don't piss your money away like I did. Take it from me. Be careful with it. Congratulations to you for winning it, but make sure you manage it well, and make sure you stay on top of the IRS. And, you have to be careful, about loaning money to friends, about everything, because it all comes into play when people know you have money.
Absolutely. I'll add a recommendation along with that Jonathan Little video is Life's a Gamble. I picked it up on Audible trying to prepare for this interview and learn a little bit, and it's amazing to me the amount of things you've done in your life. There it is right there. It's a page turner. I love it. I'm looking forward to listening to it all, so pick it up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And but anyway, you were asking about Stu Ungar. I never did tell a story about him, other than when I met him back in the late 70s. He came to Las Vegas to play gin rummy. He was absolutely the best gin rummy and the player in the world. And when he was 16 years old, he was playing gin rummy for the Mafia in New York City. And when he came to Las Vegas, at 21, playing for the Mafia. They were staking him, playing anybody in the world. He had to put phone books on the chairs to sit in the seats to play guys. And he destroyed them all. Now, when he first came to Las Vegas, I promise you, all the top poker players, every one of them were fantastic gin rummy players. Every one of them were fantastic gin rummy players. And from, Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese, Puggy Pearson, Amarillo Slim, Sarge Ferris, Tommy Fisher, all these guys were just fantastic gin rummy players. And he came out here and played him in Motor. And finally, they wouldn't play him anymore. He'd spot him. He'd put him on in 3 games. He'd let him look at the bottom card on the deck. He would still beat him and just crush him. And finally, nobody would play him anymore. And that's when he started playing poker in the big games. He started out playing poker in 2 and 400. Now, most people play $1 to $3 limit when they first started. It's still the biggest game in the world back when they first started. But, so I got to know Stewie very well because of my connection with Chip and Danny. And, he took a liking to me and he'd stake me in things. And I was just very fortunate. Like the first time they had the Super Bowl in poker, which was 1979 in Las Vegas. It was at the Las Vegas Hilton, the first big tournament ever outside the World Series. And he was playing a 1 or 207 card stud game, and they had the whole where the cash games were. There was a 2 and 400 game he was waiting to get in. It was full. And so he was playing 1 or 207 card stud, and I'm on the rail, and he's winning every pot. He's winning all these pots. And then finally, he's turned around. He sees me on the rail. He said, "Sexton, pick up a hand for me." So I jumped across the rail as quick as I could, of course, because he had to go to the restroom. So he raced down the restroom, and I pick up Queen Jack 10 with Queen Jack of diamond. Somehow I got capped in 3, and I put all the money in. I hit the 9 of diamonds on the turn. So I've got 9, 10, Jack, Queen with a 3-card flush, Again, it gets capped. And now on 5th Street, I catch an 8 to make a straight. And nobody's got a flush possibility or a pair on the board, so I have the best hand possible.
Right.
And now it goes raise, and now I 3-bet it, and just about that time, Stewie's running back to the table. The pot is a mountain of chips. The show horse couldn't jump over him at this time, And I said, I raise. And he was just so happy to hear me raise. He loved big pots. And he jumps in behind me, and I show him my cards, and now we play the hand. I get raised on 6th Street, and I still have the best hand, so I re-raise back, And now on the river, they checked him in. I bet, and I'm saying, please don't anybody raise me. And nobody did. And the one guy was rolled up, of course. The other guy had aces up in 4, and the guy was rolled up with 3-6. And I won this pot with a queen eye straight. And it was just a huge giant. And Stewie just roars out laughing. And he's just laughing. And he sits down, he's raking in all these chips. He says, I can beat you guys when I'm in the shit house. And now he said, what's that table over there? I said, well, it's 1,500 high-low split. He said, here, he gives me 1,500. I sit down in the high-low split game. I win 2,800 in the game. So he gives me 1,400 in cash in that game. And after that day, he and I became very close and bonded, So I was just in the right spot at the right time. I happened to win the only pot that I played in this game over the top of him. And that pot, because I won that pot, led me to getting this. And then at the end of the day, I had a bankroll when I was broke before the day started, 1,400. And but that led me to a lot of things. And we became pretty close and golf partners. And one thing I'll say about Stewie, because we all know he had a very serious drug problem, and I never did drugs. I didn't know what they were, didn't know anything about them, and he kept me out of that world. He just knew that I didn't. He never dragged me into that world at all. There were 2 times that he called me at 3:00 in the morning, where he was downtown in Las Vegas, down in the very bad section, down from the Horseshoe several blocks, and he said, Mike, can you come? You got to come and get me. Can you come and get me? And I was with my girlfriend, and she said, you can't go. You get killed going down there. I said, I can't leave him there. I got to go get him, So I would drive down there and get him. He'd have all this soot and black fingers, and he just looked strung out for days. It's pitiful. I mean, it was just, and I would take him to a hotel out on Boulder Highway or somewhere and put him. I said, don't call anybody. Don't tell anybody you're here, because drug dealers were after him. He owed him money and all this and that, And then the next day he called me, said, hey, you got to come and get me. You got to move me. I said, why? He said, well, somebody found out. I said, well, how can anybody find out where you are? Well, he called a drug dealer to bring him some dope over there or something, Anyway, it was a sad story. And I was so close to him, and he helped me a lot when I didn't have money. But truthfully, to a lot of high-stakes players in Las Vegas, they were very down on Stewie at the end of his life and the end of his career. He'd stiffed them all. He'd borrowed from them. He lied to them, and it was just his unfortunate disease that, cause the lives and cause him to do all this and that. But, he'd bet him in sports. He didn't pay. And, he had, and they all tried to help him. Doyle, Chip, and all of them tried to help him. But, it was just very sad at the end, the way he went out. And, I can remember probably 6 months before he died, and at that time now he owed me $7,000. I owed him. But then gradually in the 90s, I was giving him some money, and then finally he ended up owing me $7,000. I was broke. And he was standing there once and he was talking. I started walking up to him. And it's just like he could read my mind. I mean, he could just tell. And he holds up his hand just like that. He says, Mike, he said, stop right there. He said, I know what you're going to say. He said, right now you're at the top of the list. If you say one word, you're going down to the bottom. Now, he knew that I knew he owed everybody. And I said, oh, no. I'm not going to ask for money, that's the only thing I was going to ask. I said, keep me at the top. Just keep me at the top of the list. But it was so funny how quick he was. I mean, he was the quickest witted guy that I've ever seen. And I truly believe that he was like the Bobby Fischer of cards. I really believe that. And I know that, everybody believes he was, the most creative player and a genius at cards. A true genius. And every one of them to a man say he was the greatest gin rummy player. And I believe he was the greatest no-limit hold'em player ever too. But, back then he was way more aggressive than everybody else. He wouldn't be more aggressive than the guys today, for example, So how he'd fare today, I still think he would not only be the top player, that whoever was in second would be a distant second. Had he survived till the World Poker Tour came around, I believe he'd have been the biggest name. And truthfully, you got to recognize that back in his day and back in our day, he had won $10,000 buy-in tournament a year, the main World Series. And believe me, when you got knocked out of that event, back in those days, you were so depressed and so frustrated. Today it's depressing, but you're depressed for an hour. You're depressed for a day at the max. Because next week there's a $10,000 event somewhere else. You can play a lot of multiple big buy-in tournaments throughout the year, every week somewhere if you wanted to. Back then that didn't happen. There was one $10,000 buy-in event, and then when Amarillo Slim started his tournament in the 80s, there was a second $10,000 buy-in event. And that was it, that you could play. And, so it was much more depressing back in those days to get knocked out of the main event than it is today, for example. And Stewie was just very depressed every time he got knocked out of those events. He went on a drug binge and all that, and it was just very sad. Had he been around when television was here, because he loved the television, he shined on the TV, when the limelight was on him and he would win the tournament, and he loved that. But it was the between gaps that he couldn't handle because he was so depressed, but I believe had he been around for TV, that would have been him. He wouldn't have had to do cocaine. He wouldn't have had to get on the drugs because he would have thrived in that limelight. And, I love what Billy back when all these young guys are up and they're challenging everybody heads up for any amount. Everybody's playing these high stakes games. He said, I wish Stewie was around now. He said, we'd find out who the best player is. Because Billy would have put him in the biggest games in the world, let him play anybody heads up. We'd have found out who the best player is, he said. So, but in my mind, Stu Ungar will always be the greatest no-limit hold'em player. As he told me one time, he said, Mike, he said, it is possible that one day somebody could play no-limit hold'em better than I. He said, that is possible. He said, I doubt it, but it is possible. He said, but I swear to you, he said, I don't see how it's possible anybody could ever play gin rummy. And truthfully, it's amazing that all the players over the years that played really high stakes gin said he's in a league of his own. It wasn't even close. When he played gin, he'd pick up all his cards. He'd never put them in the mouth like everybody else does. And he'd play so fast, it'd just make your head spin. And he knew what you had after your second discard. He could name. It was spooky to watch him, actually. And that's why I say he had the Bobby Fischer mindset. Any card game, I didn't care what it was. He'd catch on, bang, real quick, just like it was nothing. I can remember when some poker players like Chip Reese and Puggy Pearson, these guys were playing backgammon. And Stewie just started watching them. And I can tell you, when he started playing, like in 30 days, he could move the pieces around the board as good as any. His problem was he had way too much gamble with it. He would turn the cube to people before the first thing was even stakes, and give them the advantage of that. So he was a bad gambler, but his mind was second to none. Very quick-witted, very funny, the funniest guy. And, it was just so sad that, you think of the talent that he had and you just wonder what might have been had he not got involved in the
Yeah,
drug war.
I mean, it's a real shame. Just right before the televised era, uh, it seems like an amazing character through the stories I've heard and the story you just told. So, thanks for filling us in on that and providing some context to us youngins in the game that only hear of the legend and have never heard any stories. So,
Well, I appreciate that, and let me give a shout out to Rob Young for what he's done with the Party Poker Live Tour. And I'm not saying that just because I work for Party Poker. If I didn't work for Party, what he's done over the last couple of years is mind-boggling in terms of putting up these massive prize pool guarantees and doing what he's done to try to improve the Party Poker site. And I just think players around the world should take a step back, and I know many of them do, and really appreciate the effort, the money, the time that he's put into trying to obviously or bring Party Poker back to its status, but to start a poker tour and become the largest poker 1 year after you started, like he did with the Millions Tour, is beyond mind-boggling. I mean, that is something that is just special and crazy. And, it just, when I look at this Industry Person of the Year award, how this guy hadn't won that the last 3 years in a row is just pure baffling to me. I mean, what are people looking at? Who has done more for poker in the last 2 years than Rob Young? I can tell you nobody. I just want to pay tribute to him. I'm not sucking up to him, and I'm not doing it to get any pats on the back from him or anybody else, but I just want poker players to realize the time, the money, the effort that he's put in to trying to really bring poker, big time tournament poker back. He's torn, and we talk about buy-ins, and the biggest thing lately people have been talking about is re-entry tournaments. And as you know, I did a blog on it not that long, and I've got some feelings about it. And obviously I'm a purist. I would love nothing more than everybody be at the tournament when it started, like back in the old days at the World Series, and no rebuys. And it was one shot and done. That by far is the most fairest way. Obviously, we all understand that if it's equal for all, then that's the fairest way to do it. But truthfully, in today's age, with people traveling so far to go to tournaments, you can understand why guys would want to rebuy because it's easy to get knocked out of a tournament. And who wants to travel 3,000, 5,000 miles or whatever it might be to go to a tournament where you could get knocked out right away holding pocket? And, so I think one rebuy is a good compromise. But, I like to think outside the box once in a while, And just let me ask you your opinion. I'm just curious. Let me go to the quiz master here a minute and get some random thoughts. I'm thinking outside the box because suppose this, just for example, if you were playing in a 10K buy-in event, say and like the 5 Diamond tournament in Las Vegas, the WPT event, which is unlimited rebuy. And some people squeal about it. Some people like it. It works well for that tournament. This tournament coming up in a month from now, the WPT, Legends of Poker. Not the Legends of Poker, the LAPC at the Commerce Casino. That is no buy. That's just one bullet, and that's it for everybody. Mm-hmm. So there's different, even though they're both World Poker events, one's completely different. And I think it's okay to have variety. There's nothing wrong with that. But getting back to my question here, what would you say if to have a re-entry tournament, but to re-enter it costs you $12,000 to re-enter, where you only get the original buy-in, the original amount of chips, but the extra $2,000 went to some charity, for example, that was designated. Do you think poker players would have a problem with that? Now when you get the re-entries, you have a lot of money going to charity, which is a good thing. So would you want the rebuy people to get in there, or would you be more happy if the extra $2,000 went to the prize pool? Where you add an extra $2,000 to the prize pool. And, that's one possibility that I thought of. Just suppose, for example, if you're really thinking out of the box. Now, I know the World Series will never change to no, re-entries, for example, because people will just re-enter forever in that event. But just suppose, for example, before the tournament started, okay, and you told everybody that instead of starting with $50,000 worth of chips for $10,000 buy-in, that you could start with $100,000 worth of chips if you paid $25,000 to buy in.
Right.
Now, because there's so much prize money in that tournament, I believe a lot of people would pay $25,000 to buy in and get $100,000 worth of chips, and you'd get the extra $5,000 to go to the prize pool. And now can you imagine how big that prize pool would be? And just theoretically, if you had an option to play in a poker tournament where it costs you $10,000 to get in and you get 50,000 chips, and the prize pool would be $100 million. Okay. Now you had an option.
I like this.
You had an option to let everybody else buy in for $25,000, and they started with $100,000 worth of chips. But now the prize pool is $250 million.
I love it.
Okay. And now you have an option to buy in for $10,000. Now me, I would love to have 50,000 in chips and have a 10,000 buy-in, and have everybody else in the tournament start with 100,000, and they pay 25,000 to get in. But that's me. Now maybe because I live on the short stack all my life, so it wouldn't bother me a bit, and how cool would that be? Now that would only work for an event like the World, where the prize pool is 70, 80 million, 100 million. I'm not sure it would work for a regular tournament where there wasn't that many buy-ins, but those are some kind of things that I think, who knows? Are they doable? Maybe.
Someone should try that. I think you should try that. That's very cool. Like the idea of maybe there's 10 options you could buy in for. You could buy in for, $1,000 for the stock starting stack of 100,000, and you could buy in for 1 million chips.
Yeah. That was my other option that you just mentioned, that I'm not, because people are going to squall, wow, you're always favoring the high rollers. I said, no. If the buy-in's 10,000 in the tournament, if you want to buy in 5,000, you start with 25,000 chips. If you want to buy it for 2,000, you start with 10,000 worth of chips, and then you could buy in for 20% of what the buy-in is. So you have it on both sides of the totem pole. You get people that have a lot of money that want to buy in, pay more and get more chips, and you have people that have less, that want to buy in and get a percentage of that starting stack, but they have an opportunity to get in and maybe run up their stack. But that would be an interesting concept.
They have to pay a premium. I like it. I'm with you. I don't know if the amateur player would see it the same way, because when I talk to a lot of them, they view it as people's chance to win the tournament. So if someone re-enters, they've had 2 chances to win the tournament. Now, as a poker pro, I know that they have to pay for that, and I think I've got an edge. So I'm okay with that. Like, you keep paying, I'll just keep playing. But to an amateur, well, you just doubled your chance of winning the tournament. So I don't know how it would sit with them, but I think it's brilliant, because that premium makes it profitable for the guy that won bullets. It's a good thing for them.
Yeah, but even it doesn't matter what size the buy-in tournament. If the buy-in's 5,000, you can re-enter for 6,000. You get the 5,000 starting stack like normal, the extra 1,000. So everybody is getting an extra edge, by letting the guy rebuy.
You want him to rebuy.
Money. So now you wouldn't object anybody rebuying. In fact, it would favor you in the long run, because there's that much in the prize pool.
Yep.
So, that I think is doable, and people would do that perhaps. Or you can do it with the charity aspect as well, and I think people would be okay with that. That if the money went to some certain charity as well, and I think if the poker world really wants to get big time sponsorship, I do think we got to get a little bit more heavy in the charity and donating charity. I would like to see at every poker tournament. Now, I know it's illegal in states or something like that. They tell me, I don't know for sure, but when you register for a poker tournament, I would like to see that tournament have 3 designated charities that money can go to. For example, Special Olympics, maybe Paralyzed Veterans of America, maybe to the Bush Fund in Australia, for example. So one tournament could have like 3 separate charities, and before the tournament starts, you can designate 3%, for example, of whatever you win in the prize money will go to that charity, or you can have 1% for each charity. You could check a box that says all the above.
Right.
So now everybody would be donating 3% to some certain charity. But I believe once word got out about how much money was can you imagine how much money would be going to charity if the poker world took 3% of the prize money and donated to charities at the end of the world? I mean, I don't care how anti-game, everybody would stand up and salute that.
Yes.
And say, wow, look at those poker people. That is really doing something, donating multi-millions of dollars to worthwhile charities. And that's just fantastic. We love these poker people. And I think corporate America or corporate sponsors around the world would take note, and It just seems like that, you could have a Lexus championship or a Budweiser championship or a Nike championship or whatever major sponsor may come along for each particular poker tournament, and they don't have to sponsor every tournament around the world. They don't do that tour. There's one title sponsor for every golf tour. I think it's doable in the poker world. But before it's doable, the entire world has got to look upon poker as a good thing and not a bad thing because of what their charity type of thing. And there are a lot of, people that are anti-gambling, et cetera, out there. But nowadays, gambling is becoming so popular. And now, for years, for example, in Las Vegas, every sports league was so anti-gambling, but now they've turned their heads. Now we got NFL franchises, we got hockey franchises. We're going to be holding the Super Bowl here the very first possible year it's eligible, I promise. And it's all about gambling in the future, and the DraftKings and some of the future of sports betting places is going to be in every state across the country here before long. So, it's here. The professional sports leagues realize it. They also realize that half their viewership is based on people that are betting on the game.
Yeah,
at least half, I would say. So, you can't hide under the wool forever. You got to come out, accept it for what it is. Appreciate people do want to have a bet on the game. It's in the game, and it's life. And I think the same thing can be applied to the poker world. And they recognize that people are going to play poker. It does cost money. To some people, it is gambling. And accept it for what it is and appreciate it, and realize that millions and millions, not just in the U.S. but around the world now, love to play poker. And it's astonishing to me how global poker is now. I mean, as I say over and over again, it's mind-boggling, just how big poker has gotten around the world, and it's just going to get bigger. People say, is poker dying, blah, blah, blah. Forget about it. Even numbers in the U.S. in the tournaments are up, even though there's so many tournaments. And there's tournaments everywhere, every weekend, in the U.S. And now we got big tournaments everywhere in the world all the time. It's just getting bigger, and it's just fantastic to see. And, I certainly want to recommend everyone that's in a country where online gaming and online poker is available for you to get on Party Poker and try to qualify and win your seat to these millions tournaments, because they're fun to go to. And I wish you all the best of luck in the world. I'm pulling for you. But like Jamie said, if I'm ever at any event, if I'm ever at any location, I don't care what, don't hesitate to come up to me and say hi, because I will chat with you. I will talk with you. I do appreciate you. And I thank you for even recognizing who I am and saying hello.
Yeah, please do. Don't make my mistake. I regretted it for 5 years. So just say hi to Mike Sexton.
You should have come up. We'd have been pounds. We could have done this years ago.
I know. It's a huge error, but I've fixed it now. Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Some great wisdom. I've learned a lot. I know the community has as well. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure, Jamie. Thank you for having me on.
That's it for the interview with Mike Sexton. Huge thanks again for Mike taking the time to do the interview with me today. What an amazing guy, an inspiring guy. Awesome opportunity to speak with him. But last part of the podcast here, let's do JS Poker Hero, our competition on the podcast to have a representative play for us out there and represent the podcast strong, trying to win some money on the Party Poker. So we have a small hero story from someone that's won this competition. Rebel, who won a ticket last week, made the final day and finished 158th in the Party Poker Million for $920. This week's winner, there was 4,599 entries into last week's Party Poker Million. So the winner is Jack9118171139 on Twitter, who guessed 4,578 on the final day, or on the day that the promo went live. So right off the bat. So Jack, congratulations. You are the winner this week. So you're going to get a ticket into your account here. Next week's competition, we have an interesting sort of contest here. And since KO Series is coming up, it is going to be for KO Series event 33 High. This is a $215 buy-in knockout event on a Sunday, so it should be a massive event. I'll definitely be in there and playing with you, whoever ends up winning this. In honor of Mike Sexton this week, I have a skill testing question for all of you. This is some information that you could find in his book, and I would recommend picking it up and reading it and or listening to it on Audible or wherever you do that, because it's really a great listen. So What is the month and the year that Party Poker went live for the first time? The first person that correctly sends in that answer using the hashtag JSPokerHero, again, the month and the year that Party Poker first went live, first person is going to get a ticket into that KO Series Event 33 High, $215 buy-in knockout. So that is the question this week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Best of luck to our hero this week, Jack, in that Party Poker Million, the final Party Poker Million. But that's going to be it from me. Thanks so much for listening or watching. But until next week, we'll see you later.